Hi everyone. So we are heading towards the last section of Unit 4, that is your depressants and stimulants. So you can see very well the arrows to upward side in stimulants and the downward side arrows in depressants. So if we talk about stimulants, we are very well aware that it reminds us about cocaine, then you have khat, then you have nicotine and prescription stimulants. And whenever we talk about depressants, we have in our mind about the alcohol, cannabis, heroin, and other opioids. So, what are basically these stimulants? So, how do they work? So, stimulants are basically those drugs which generally speed up the message traveling between the brain and the body. So, this arrow is generally for the speeding up of the messages traveling between the brain and the body. And so they typically doing this work, they typically increase the pulse and the breathing rate, finally which elevates the blood pressure, suppress the appetite and dilates the pupils. Now, what to expect from these stimulants? So, if we talk about stimulants, they often produce a type of effect which is known as euphoric effect. So, euphoric effect is with some people, you can see they feel more alert, energetic, and confident. So, a person using stimulants, they may be talkative, agitated, and experience insomnia, that is, lack of sleep. And with the prolonged use or if taken in large doses, this may cause anxiety, panic, seizures in which the neurons are in the excited stage. You have headaches, cramps, aggression, and typical type of disorders related to it. So the long-term use of stimulants, it can lead to range of physical and mental health conditions, and also they can deteriorate your state of like it can go for hyper anxiety levels, and the depression levels can be typically very high in case of like if it goes wrong with the doses. What drugs are depressants? So I already talked about alcohol, cannabis, heroin. So how do these depressant work? We talked about stimulant, but what about depressants? So depressant drugs, they generally slow down. So this downward arrow, it depicts the slowing up of the functioning of the brain. This these type of depressant, they generally typically they relieve the anxiety. So they are taken to slow down these processes, these never ending type of neuron activity that is generally in the excited state. So they don't necessarily make a person feel depressed, but rather they reduce the coordination and impair concentration and judgment. So what to expect from these depressants? They often produce feeling of being relaxed, calm, or to help with the sleep. If we talk about the short-term effects, it may include some of the dizziness process, poor balance and coordination, and much slower reflexes. In large doses, they may cause drowsiness, nausea, and loss of consciousness also. If we talk about the long-term use of depressants, they can also lead to range of physical and mental health conditions. Now, we will be proceeding towards the other. So, classifying drugs by their effects, if we talk about this, drugs can be classified in terms of like the ways they are affecting the CNS, the central nervous system of brain. So, they can be classified according to the typical type of categories which are being listed here. So, if we are going for some medicinal or recreational activity or the typical uses, then we can classify the drugs in many ways. If we are going for the specific effect or the target analysis of this typical medicine, we can categorize it in another way. If we go for the source of the substance, that is it from a synthetic source or from a type of plant source, then also it can be categorized. Then is the status legal or illegal? That can be a type of criteria for classifying drugs. And also the final criteria is the safety and type of threat, that is the risk factor which is being posed by this drug to to the central nervous system. So, one of the most common and useful ways of classifying a drug is by the effect that if it has on the person's central nervous system. When we talk about central nervous system, we are talking about that master part, brain. So it is all about the psychoactive drugs and what are the effects it produces in the person's individual, or how does it affect the person's individual brain or central nervous system. So, if we talk about typical psychoactive drugs, we can classify it number of categories which have some type of stimulant effects, some type depressant effects like cannabis. So, classifying drugs by their effect, how can we classify them? So, they can be classified into stimulants. I already told you that these stimulants are being taken to speed up the activity and to speed up the that message activity between the body and the brain. And finally, these include amphetamines, cocaine, your pseudoephedrine, that is nicotine and caffeine. So these are the typical examples related to these stimulants. When we talk about depressants, which are also known as relaxants, so they are known to slow down the activity to calm the central nervous system. But when taken in large amount, they can be having a type of mental, physical type of disorders that can affect that patient. So if we talk about the example, you have alcohol on the top, then you have major tranquilizers, you have opioids that contain heroin, morphine, and you have some type of volatile substance associated with that also. Also, we have a category known as your hallucinogens. So they are the ones which alter the ability of users' sensor perceptions by generally degrading or distorting the messages carried into the brain. So common example is your LSD, and this includes your additional drugs also like magic mushroom, that is your psilocybin. Then you have mescaline, that is peyote cactus. It has a variety of hallucinogenic effects on the patient, on the person who is taking it. If we talk about what is the what is the difference between stimulants and depressants, so these are the two main classes of the drugs that generally goes on affecting the type of central nervous system activity, how a person would behave, feel and think. So although they are both in a same target to affect the central nervous system, but they have some type of opposite end or opposite actions. So they can generally, if we talk about both, they can become addictive and resulting in the need of treatment in a drug rehab center. So these are generally a type of additives, a type of you can say the type of addiction pattern can be developed by the person who is taking both, like stimulants or depressants. So it can be in both the way that the person becomes addicted to it. Now, if we talk about stimulants' characteristic, ability, and effect, these are being prescribed by the medical doctors in terms of treating many conditions that include depression. Then you have narcolepsy, and also needed to increase the focus, energy, and feeling of well-being if taken in a type of desired doses. If we talk about non-prescription stimulants, so these stimulants, they exist in the form of certain items that can be purchased from the market, from the pharmaceutical shops. These include your aspirin, caffeinated beverages, nicotine, and topical pain relief products, so they can be easily availed from the market. Then you have a category illegal stimulants, so they are being packaged, manufactured and being sold in the form of cocaine, these type of party drugs. So these illegal stimulants, they are not highly addictive, but also have highly dangerous impacts. Among the agents they used to cut and dilute illegal stimulants, they are their non-prescription counterparts, like you have aspirin and caffeine. So, what are the effects on the brain? I already discussed with you that it has a typical type of effect that generally exacerbate or generally increase that messaging power between the brain and body, and finally you start feeling very good because of the release of some of the neurotransmitters like dopamine, norepinephrine. These are being released, and dopamine is the like feel good chemical, and it feels awesome when you take these type of stimulants. Now, if we talk about depressants' characteristic ability and effect, these are also commonly prescribed by the doctors in order to slow the brain activity, decrease the blood pressure, alertness, low respiration, lower heart rate. And also, they are being used to treat anxiety, seizures, disorder, and sleep disorders, as they are known to produce some calming effect, and they are known to relax or bring that person into a relaxed mood if taken in type of typical doses. This generally has some type of illegal depressants also, non-prescription depressants also. So if we talk about the non-prescription depressants, alcohol. So alcohol is one of the most common known and misused depressants. So If we talk about the illegal depressants, you have illegal depressants that are like heroin, cannabis, although not illegal by themselves, but prescription depressants like Vellum. If we talk about Vellum, it can have an illegal facet when a user purchases this substance on the street or commits a crime. So this is a typical type of illegal categories. So this was all about depressants and stimulants. Hope you have understood about the basic differences between them and what are the typical examples associated with it.